One of the aspects of Phrolova's symbolism I didn't cover really well or that much in my longer form analysis video was a link to Macbeth that is all throughout her story. While it was mentioned in passing in my original analysis, there's been a lot that I've discovered since the inception of my previous video that I feel I need to make another longer form video just to talk about it. To begin, we should start with probably what is the most obvious reference between the two, Hecate. Just like how Hecate is Phrolova's partnered echo of sorts, Hecate also exists as a character in Macbeth, being the queen of witches and a leader of the infamous Three Witches in the play. Pushing aside the existing symbolism of Hecate as a Greek goddess of liminality and the underworld, Hecate in Macbeth serves as the puppet master, guiding the witches to control the strings of fate, influencing what has not yet happened. As the real ultimate authority within the play, she mirrors Phrolova's role in calling her for prophecies to glimpse into the future of the Renacita storyline, which already borrows quite a bit from Macbeth, where witches deliver prophecies that influence what is going to happen. This is followed through with the boss fight against Hecate during the 2.0 updates, which prophesizes the entire story of the Renacita and Septimon quests through three prophecies that Phrolova gleans from Hecate. This is a direct mirror to Macbeth, who in both Act 1 and Act 4 Scene 1 is given three parallel prophecies that Hecate commands the three witches to give to Macbeth. The first of Phrolova's prophecies, that to ascend to the throne a sacrifice of fresh blood is needed, mirrors the first of Macbeth's prophecies, where the witches tell Macbeth that he will be a king in the future, while telling his friend Banquo on the other hand that his descendants will be kings. This is majorly concerning to Macbeth, because if Banquo's descendants are going to be kings, that means that Macbeth's descendants won't be. Further, Duncan, the King of Scotland at the time, had recently named his son Malcolm as his heir, so the only logical way that Macbeth can become king is to kill the king himself. Macbeth does do this, but he nearly chickens out while doing so, which is why Phrolova says that one needs to abandon trifles of sentiment to ascend to the throne. Phrolova's line that a purge of the Holy Maiden and heretics is needed is also a reference to how Macbeth kills the rightful king to disrupt the natural order, thus plunging the world into chaos. Between the first of Macbeth's prophecies in Act 1 and the second in Act 4, Macbeth has already killed the king and is basically becoming more and more guilty and crazy. This is why during the Hecate boss fight, in between speaking the first and the second prophecy, Phrolova says a brilliant line that is a direct reference to Macbeth. "My king, what halts your advance? You have already tainted your feet in the river of blood. There is no retreat." In the play, after Macbeth becomes king, he effectively goes on a killing spree to try to eliminate threats to his power, which leads to a mental collapse and immense regret, as he begins to lament that he must keep going, otherwise he's basically screwed. This is expressed very clearly in Macbeth's famous "Tommorow, tomorrow, and tomorrow" speech, where he laments that time itself seems to have stopped, as he is unable to stop going on the path of destruction and violence. This speech, or soliloquy as we call it, is particularly important because its first line is actually quoted by the Grand Architect in the form of Tris in Phrolova's story, where she, like Macbeth, needs to be reminded that there is no turning back on her quest. This is something that is reinforced by the promise that the Grand Architect makes with Phrolova, being that, disdaining fortune, with its power clutched in our grasp before its fall, we shall wield it, and call forth every forgotten soul. This is a reference to Macbeth, where, after he beheads his enemy at the beginning of the play in Act 1, is praised by one of his comrades as one who disdains fortune, who basically spits in the face of fate and luck in order to find his way to success. What this essentially means is that, like Macbeth at the beginning of the play, Phrolova will go against fate, being death itself, to save the villagers. the Grand Architect essentially affirms that, with Leviathan's gem, Phrolova is capable of doing the seemingly impossible. The second of Phrolova's prophecies, that no mortal shall inflict upon you even the slightest harm, is a direct link to Macbeth's second prophecy, that the power of man, for none of woman born shall harm Macbeth, is essentially exactly the same. What this prophecy basically means is that no one who is born from a woman shall harm Macbeth, which he interprets as essentially him being invincible, as, logically speaking, everyone is born from a woman. Essentially, both Phrolova's and Macbeth's prophecies provides the person asking a sense of immortality, as no one is able to hurt them, but this of course is not without caveats. At the end of the play of Macbeth, the person who kills him, Macduff, is revealed to have been born, quite funnily enough, from a C-section, not technically of a woman born, at least in Shakespeare's eyes. The point of this whole prophecy is to reveal that it itself provides a false sense of security, and that fate often plays around with those who interpret it too literally. While Macbeth is technically killed by someone not woman-born, Fenrico, who Phrolova's prophecies are very obviously talking about, is also eventually killed by Phrolova, who is someone that is half dead and technically not mortal. As such, it makes sense that Phrolova can harm Fenrico according to the prophecy, because she herself is not technically mortal. The third of Phrolova's prophecies, that pleasure born of violence shall end in violence, is not exactly a 100% match word for word to Macbeth's third prophecy, but it is a very strong match when it comes to meaning. The final prophecy that Macbeth receives is that he will never be defeated until Great Birnam Wood reaches Dunsinane Castle, which is where he reigns as king. Of course, this reinforces Macbeth's idea that he is invincible, because, of course, a forest can't move to a castle. That's ridiculous. However, the army that comes to invade and kill him ends up breaking the branches off the trees of Birnam Wood to use as camouflage, which technically fulfills the words of the final prophecy. What's important about this, however, is that this final third prophecy is fulfilled at the very end of Macbeth, when he is finally and climactically defeated. In the final scene of Macbeth, he is beheaded in a way which mirrors Macbeth's act in beheading one of his enemies at the very beginning of the play, essentially bringing the story full circle. Because of this, Phrolova's final prophecy actually matches very well to Macbeth, showing how his act of violence, both in killing his enemies and eventually also killing his king, provides him the pleasure of kingship, but it will also end with him being killed and beheaded as well, in this sort of endless cyclical cycle. Pleasure born of violence shall end in violence. Besides this, there are few other references to Macbeth in Phrolova's story. When Phrolova summons Hecate to tell the prophecy that we just talked about, she actually also quotes Macbeth directly, saying that the wildcat has sounded thrice, the hedgehog four. The peculiar bird sings, the moment is upon us. This is a direct quote from Act 4, Scene 1 of Macbeth, where the witches are preparing to tell Macbeth his prophecies. The witches are essentially in the scene chanting a spell, calling upon animals that are tied to superstition and magic. For people who have studied Macbeth, usually we kind of take this scene as Shakespeare reinforcing the idea that fate and the future has been set in stone, and nothing can be done to change it. For example, once Macbeth has received his prophecies that he has become king, then you can make the argument that it wouldn't have mattered how good of a person he was, because fate was essentially pulling the strings. The fact that all of these prophecies have in some capacity come true through the Renacita and Septimon story is only further proof of their authenticity, no matter how twisted it is. The final reference to Macbeth I could find within Phrolova's story is in a cutscene where she states, "The weeping child lingers no more. Instead, she raises her hand to claim that vaporous drop." Framing herself as a weeping child who was once broken by loss and grief, Phrolova, as we now know well enough in her story, essentially states that she has to let go of sentimentality for the brutal efficiency of whatever is necessary to achieve her goals. We know this because the vaporous drop that she mentions in her second line actually is a reference from Macbeth as well. The vaporous drop is a sort of magic dew that Hecate in Macbeth harvests from the divine figure of the moon in order to power her magic to doom Macbeth. This is, of course, a symbolic parallel to Leviathan's gem in Phrolova's story, which is not only shaped as a teardrop or a dewdrop, but Phrolova, as a representative of Hecate, uses it to power her magic and achieve her goals. She will do anything to get what she wants, using the power of the divine, whether it be Leviathan or the moon, to do so. Thanks for watching my little video. If you're seeing this for the first time, I do recommend watching my longer form video on Phrolova's symbolism to get more symbolic analyses like this one. Besides that, I'm sort of kind of trialing these new videos which are a bit shorter, talk about basically a smaller concept instead of like a resonator showcase, because sometimes I want to talk about something I missed, or for example, it's something that needs more detail that you can fit in than what you can fit in a YouTube short or a tweet, but not really as long as a half an hour showcase. So please let me know what you think about this format. As always, I'm open to critique or discussion, so feel free to leave some comments. I'll be preparing to work on analysis of Iono very soon, so with that, I will see you guys next time.